Here I am. My name is Henry, and I'll tell you about how my first year in college began. After the enrollment procedures, I finally had the opportunity to explore the campus. The organizers took us on a tour, showing us the library, classrooms, and finally, led us to our rooms. My room was shared with a guy named Lucas. During the initial introduction, he seemed like a normal guy, nothing particularly noteworthy. He was there, smiling, while the college representatives explained the rules and showed us all the amenities the campus offered. Lucas had a common appearance, nothing extravagant, and during the initial introduction, he seemed like a quiet guy. In the evening, after all the introductions, I returned to our room. It was already dark outside and the campus had a peaceful atmosphere. When I entered, I saw Lucas sitting on his bed, motionless, staring into space. It was a bit strange, I must admit. The dim light in the room reflected in his eyes, but he seemed mentally elsewhere. I cleared my throat slightly, trying to get his attention, but nothing. Lucas continued to gaze ahead as if he hadn't noticed me. I thought maybe he was just thinking about something important, or who knows, perhaps he was just distracted. The fatigue of the first days of college takes its toll, I thought. Despite the oddity of the moment, I decided not to dwell on it too much. I organized my things, put on my pajamas, and went to bed. It was only the first day after all. It could have been just one of those strange and random things that happen when you meet someone for the first time. I knew I would have enough time to better understand who Lucas was. And so, with this idea in mind, I fell asleep, hoping that the next day everything would be clearer. The next morning, I woke up. But when I turned to the other bed, I noticed something strange. Lucas wasn't there. His bed was neat, as if he hadn't slept at all. I checked the clock, thinking maybe he had gotten up early, but it was only 6:30. I pretended not to care, thinking he might have had some commitments with friends, so I didn't dwell on it much. After a few hours, it was time to go out with my new friends. We all met at the campus exit. The plan, as they had told me, was to stop at the first pub and drink until late. Even though it wasn't the best plan, it was still better than staying home with Lucas. A few hours later, when we were all a bit drunk, I asked the others if they knew Lucas. They all replied that he was a very strange guy and that there were weird rumors about him. I didn't ask any more questions and dropped the subject. At the end of the night, around 4 a.m, I returned to my room alone, still a bit drunk. When I opened the door, there were only a few lights on, but enough to see Lucas sitting on his bed, motionless like a statue. It was even more unsettling, and I couldn't find any possible explanations for his behavior. I approached with a smile, trying to appear normal. As if nothing had happened, I asked him if everything was okay, hoping to get some explanation. But Lucas's response was only a vague, "Yes, everything's fine." At that moment, he lay down and fell asleep as if nothing had happened. That episode frightened me, and I couldn't trust Lucas, so I decided to stay awake, waiting for something to happen, hoping to make sense of it. After an hour, I was about to fall asleep when Lucas suddenly got up from the bed and stood in front of me, staring at me. It was very unsettling. Still, I remained in bed, pretending to be asleep. Around 6 a.m, Lucas left the room as he was without taking anything. Having not slept a wink that night, I finally went to sleep and skipped all the classes I had that day. When I woke up late in the morning, I applied to change rooms. After explaining the reasons, they moved me to a new room the same day. Fortunately, my new roommate was one of the friends I had just made, and I knew he was normal. As soon as I arrived in the new room, I settled in, and in the evening, we all went out to celebrate. As usual, we went to the bar. When we finished, it was around 4 a.m. We were both drunk and looking for the room. When we finally got to the door, we saw it slightly ajar, but we remembered closing it. At that moment, we immediately thought that burglars had entered. But when we opened the door, we saw Lucas rummaging through my things. When he noticed us, he started running immediately. We tried to catch him, but we couldn't. So, we had to chase him. He was running all over the campus. At one point, he went into the woods and we followed, but at some point we lost him because it was too dark. When we wanted to go back, we realized that we no longer remembered the way. We tried every way to go back, but we couldn't, so we decided to sleep in the woods until morning. At 7 a.m., thanks to the faint light, we managed to find our way back. When we returned to our room, my things were gone. We immediately rushed to Lucas's room, but no one answered, so we called security to have the door opened. Lucas was there, motionless on the bed, staring into nothing. Security took him away for questioning, and in the meantime, my belongings were all there. We brought them back to the new room and then went to sleep. The next day, the principal came to apologize for the incident the night before, and told us that he had expelled Lucas from school because they had sent him to a clinic for help. Since that day, I haven't heard from Lucas, and I haven't had any more problems at college. I immersed myself in university life like anyone else, but a frightening incident with a guy named Jason resurfaces from time to time. I attended Kingston University for 3 years. In no time, I formed close bonds with a diverse group of friends, and every weekend was an opportunity for new adventures. One November evening, when our group had no specific plans, 2 close friends and I decided to spend some time in the city park, known for its tranquil atmosphere. There was a small hidden corner in the park near a pond, perfect for camping. Since it was out of sight from potential observers, some young people occasionally gathered there to drink or smoke, even though it was an unfamiliar area for most people. We liked that sense of exclusivity. That evening, we brought some beers, lit a fire, and enjoyed what we called a chill moment. As the evening progressed, time seemed to fly by with the effect of alcohol. At one point, we were all so caught up in laughter that one of my friends was rolling on the ground in the leaves. Suddenly, the other friend stopped laughing and gestured for us to be quiet. We listened carefully and heard the rustle of leaves and branches coming from a distance. I was a bit drunk, so my paranoia was escalating. Probably, it was for all of us. The fire exposed us to anyone passing through the park. However, this place was so unknown and remote that it was rare to encounter anyone so deep into the park. It seemed there was only one person in the distance. The sound of a breaking branch not too far away startled us all. None of us had the courage to confront the situation, and we were all silent. We heard someone or something moving near us, as if deliberately walking around our small campsite. It started to feel like we were part of a horror movie because of the sounds in the nearby distance, like branches breaking and leaves crunching on the ground. We laughed at first, but personally, I soon began to feel a shiver of terror. Suddenly, someone threw a huge log into the lake, making all 3 of us jump. From that moment on, there were no more noises. It was very strange. Maybe whoever it was had decided to leave us alone. I don't know why, but we didn't ask questions and slowly got up to leave. However, one of my friends, out of fear, started running, while the other and I stayed behind, looking to see if anyone was in the woods. I had the feeling that we still didn't know if it was a prank or not. Then, at some point, we heard branches breaking again and the sound of footsteps, but this time they were coming toward us. Worried, we started running too. The friend next to me stumbled and fell to the ground. I stopped to help him, but he had sprained his ankle and couldn't walk, so we had to call our other friend who was ahead of us. We lifted him and helped him get up, running in the direction of the dormitories. When we reached the road that separated the park from our campus, we stopped to catch our breath. But whoever was out there showed that they were following us when we heard footsteps approaching the road. After 20 minutes of running with our friend on our shoulders, we couldn't take it anymore. So we decided to turn around and use our phone flashlights to see who this person was. When we turned around, there was no one there. Calmly, we returned to the dormitory and all went to sleep. The next morning, we took our friend to the infirmary and told them he had fallen down the stairs. They didn't ask questions and let us go. Later in the afternoon, we went into the woods to try to understand what had happened, but we found nothing. There was no sign of our campsite from the previous night. It was probably some fanatic environmentalist trying to make us leave the lake to avoid pollution, as I can't think of anything else. This story takes place during the first week of school, in my freshman year at the University of Iowa. I was starting to feel comfortable with my new roommate. We had just arrived, and neither of us had attended any parties yet. I'm not much of a party person, but my roommate was. He really wanted to go, and he insisted I join him because it would be harder for him to meet new people if he went alone. Since I felt a bit sorry for him, I agreed. Even though I had no interest in attending a party, I couldn't avoid it, especially since I was attending a school known for its parties. The upcoming parties were scheduled for Friday and Saturday. I promised him I would go to the smaller Friday party with fewer people. That night we were driving to the house where the party was being held. I was pretty sure it was a very spontaneous gathering, as it was taking place in an abandoned house, and not many people were expected to attend. This wasn't because no one knew about it, but because everyone knew it would be quite pathetic. When we arrived, there were only a few cars, and loud music could be heard all the way to campus. We knocked on the door and were immediately greeted by a short, chubby guy in a white t-shirt holding a Solo cup. His shirt had sweat stains under the arms and around the belly. He told us to come in right away. The party itself took place in a terribly dark room, with about 50 guys crowded in the living room. It was extremely hot inside, making everything even worse. I think I saw maybe 2 girls at the entire party, and neither of them was anywhere near attractive. I gave the party about 20 minutes talking to a stranger. Everyone gave off antisocial vibes, keeping to themselves, drinking, and occasionally nodding their heads to the rhythm. In the end, I signaled to my roommate to get ready to leave, partly because I was bored and partly because I had never seen such a terrible party. But the short guy who welcomed us stopped us at the door, saying we couldn't leave so soon because more people would be arriving soon. My roommate stayed at the party without thinking, and I couldn't leave him alone with these crazy people, so I made the effort to stay at the party as well. I continued to drink the cheap beers they were serving. I think I had 6 before I even felt slightly drunk. One of the 2 girls approached me with a small bottle in hand and handed it to me. I thought it was one of those games to lead me to bed later. But she smiled and said, "This will get you buzzed." I laughed a bit fake to not let her know she was crazy, but she continued to stand there motionless with the bottle in hand. So, to get her to leave, I took the bottle and drank it all. It was perhaps the equivalent of 2 shots of some strong liquor. After that, the girl started talking to me normally, as if nothing had happened. After a few minutes, things started to blur quite quickly. I suddenly felt dizzy, and it seemed like the floor was coming at me. This is the last memory before waking up in a dark room, lying on a bed, with a headache and bleeding. I could still hear the sound of the music behind the walls, so I knew I was still in the party house. It was a very dark room, but I could see something thanks to a small light coming from under the door. At one point, I heard the sound of footsteps followed by the creaking of a wooden plank, and in the darkness, I glimpsed the girl's face. Without asking any questions, I ran out of that room and went downstairs back into the crowded living room. I found my roommate and pushed him out of the main door, making the guy who initially let us in fall. During the car ride back to campus, I told my roommate that I had been drugged and that I was going to call the police. He stopped me and said I was drunk, and if we got caught having drunk, we would get into trouble too. So, I pretended then and there that nothing had happened. Then my friend asked a somewhat uncomfortable question. He asked if I had been assaulted. I hadn't thought about that situation, so I immediately checked. I found a condom still on me. I immediately went back to look for the girls, but when we arrived at the party, there was no one left. As if from the moment we left, the party was over. Even today, I can't explain anything about that night.